the first thing I want to talk about is kind of something that Nick Scott talked about a little bit too. Both Nicks talked about it a little bit. Is this Web 3? Okay, so Web 3 is where the internet is headed, and it's decentralized, and it's blockchain, and it's cryptocurrency, and it's metaverse, and all of these terms are kind of interchangeable when talking about what's what Web3 is. They're not interchangeable in what they describe. Blockchain, decentralization, and WebXR and all this stuff are unique facets of what would overall be called Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is great news for basically everybody. Because if you're a developer or an engineer or mathematician or whatever, there's a whole bunch of opportunities to create efficient blockchains and cryptocurrencies and all types of interesting and fun stuff. But if you're like most of us, if you're a 3D artist and you want to be able to contribute in more of an autonomous way, or at least take advantage of some of the other opportunities that are coming up. Web3 is basically, it's basically something called 3JS, which if I just type 3JS into Google, you're going to see that 3JS is a JavaScript, is a JavaScript language that is basically, most of the internet is built off of JavaScript. And I'm not going to go super deep into the coding stuff because I don't know it, and I don't think it's necessary to. But 3JS is basically the ability for you to have a viewport, a rendering engine inside of the browser, right? So fun stuff like, this little graphic here where it's like I can move this around and translate it. That's being rendered in real time, 60 frames per second in 3JS. And 3JS has a whole bunch of projects that are really neat. And the geniuses at JavaScript are building these things all the time, just like the geniuses at Chaos Group are making V-Ray, or Solid Angle are making Arnold, or Pixar are making RenderMan. You've got JavaScript making 3JS, and they have some really phenomenal web experiences that I'm loading this in. I haven't seen this before, but I mean, it's pretty cool.
I thought you'd know.
Yeah, nuts. So these are actually like,
what's your real name?
Polygons that are being rendered in the browser. It's a whole stream of them. And so what Mozilla has done with this, Mozilla is like, hey, by the way, Mozilla is like the coolest company on earth, right? They're super active about privacy. They're basically the most trusted name, the most trusted internet company there is, in terms of fighting for the people to have access and privacy. And they're also a nonprofit company. And what they did is they're like, hey, this 3JS stuff is super cool. So we're going to build an open source software that exists on top of 3JS that uses the 3JS rendering in order to render out all these 3D models in a whole bunch of different screens at once. So in a whole bunch of different browser windows. So I could pop into hubs.mozilla.com. I have a little scene ID here, and it's winter. I'm going to the Winter Lodge room. And if it loads it up, it's going to take a minute because I'm streaming and recording and doing a few other things. And so there is a limit to how fast this is going to pop open because of those other things, not really because it takes a tremendously long time, but it's hardware dependent. The access hardware is going to be a huge factor in consideration when you're optimizing and when you're building for these things. Let's see. I stalled a little bit talking about access hardware so that way it would load. Here we go. So I'm just going to join this room. I think I'm a ghost now. I'm going to mute this and enter this room. So here's a 3D model that has been light baked. And it doesn't actually have a floor, but it's relatively low poly. This is, you can see it's a bit laggy, and I am doing a bunch of things on my computer. So this may not be like the best example because it is a little bit laggier. But you can see that this room is like modeled, textured, lit, light baked, and is rendering now in real time as I move the camera around at maybe 30 frames per second. Typically you want to get to 60, of course, and it's very doable to get to 60. It just happens to be I'm doing a whole bunch of things at once right now. But you can see that this space is pretty cool. And also we could meet here the same way that we meet in Discord or in Zoom or anywhere. We could have this same conversation where we're all just kind of hanging around the couch and having this this 3D model delivered to us. And it's fun because it's got, emojis that you pop open and they smile at you. And this is I shouldn't use this scene because it's a bit heavy. But it was one of my favorites. But yeah, it's super easy. You just create a room, and then you can choose from their library of rooms that they have available that are public rooms. Now, everything in here is an open source product. Now, that doesn't mean decentralized. Decentralized is more like the crypto blockchain thing where it's decentralized technologically. But open source is kind of like decentralized for humans. Like it's allows you to duplicate, download, copy, and recreate, reinterpret any of this code or any of these models or any of this stuff. It's open source. It's available to everybody. And the browser, the system that they use, you have a cute little, WASD to move, space to show the menus, and G to fly. So if I turn on G, I can just fly around, right? So this is a 3D model that someone built, someone modeled, textured, and light baked, and we can show off all this stuff. Now, as you can imagine, and as what Nick, the green Nick, alluded to, is that companies are going to want to have this experience inside of the next year. We all saw Facebook rebrand to Meta and Zuckerberg's announcement about that. There was some snips and some memes going around about it. But basically, this space is going to be opened up because 3JS, JavaScript, is delivering 3D models through the browser, and there's VR headsets that are getting passed around all over the place. And every Christmas, there's a whole new million of them that goes out. Accessing 3D environments, plus, pandemic, right? Accessing 3D environments and virtual environments and offices and rooms where we can connect in a more intimate way than just a traditional Zoom room or Discord or whatever. And even just a more engaging and fun way, having galleries, NFTs, and having NFT galleries. Like, there's a big demand for these types of spaces where people can connect and they can experience and browse through, experience them, whether that be through a browser the way I'm doing right now, which is just clicking and dragging, or through a mobile browser where you can actually move the phone around and you can see the different areas of the environment, or through a VR headset. And this is just going to become more and more and more popular. As Sean alluded to, the gaming industry and how mixing gaming and education, like the gaming industry is going to be blended with every other industry. Like, this can be seen as kind of a game type platform. If you were to design games in this space, it would be. And so we're going to watch game mechanics and game and level design and game concepts are going to be applied to more conventional brand identities, more the brands that used to just be about logos and not just logos, but experience. And like Prada, for example. The big thing about Prada is you put a Prada logo on your bag, you sell that bag, and everybody's like, oh, they've got a Prada bag. It's like a big deal, right? And that's something that we in our society have escalated in importance and value. But if Prada doesn't have a virtual space to sell their bags in, to sell their NFTs in, to have all this stuff, well, then Gucci, when Gucci does, they're going to win, right? And it's kind of like the same thing is going to happen with online therapy. The difference between someone being in a Zoom meeting and someone lying down on a beach, it's going to have a huge, profound impact, right? So every business is going to need something like this, just the same way every business needs a logo, right? It's going to be an inevitability, and that creates a huge opportunity for 3D artists that know how to build in this space. And one of the things that Kyle said, talking about procedural generation, like that's just a faster way to build stuff. If we're procedurally generating rooms that are able to, we could create a unique procedural and modular art gallery by sliding a few sliders around and having those art galleries generate, and then we could mass produce art galleries, and then you might start an art gallery business, like an art gallery meta company that just creates art galleries for NFT artists, which there would be an incredible amount of demand for this. There's no shortage of use cases. Education, gaming, entertainment, and all just medicine, whether that be health, mental health, or physical health, yoga. Like, there isn't an industry that wouldn't benefit from having a space like this inside of 10 years. So it's really advantageous for us right now to learn about it, to learn how to build these spaces, to get involved in what's happening, because this is going to be the dominant, one of the most dominant elements in the economy for the foreseeable future. Now, that's kind of like a real top-down view, and why I really love Mozilla Hubs and why Charles really loves Mozilla Hubs is because they are open source and because they have this thing called Hubs Cloud. Hubs Cloud is your ability to download the Hubs Cloud code and have your own server on your own website that is your own Mozilla Hubs. It's your own private instance of Mozilla Hubs. Because if I create a room here and I pop into this room, these are all public rooms. They're all hosted on Mozilla Hubs. If I share a file in here or do anything like that, then it exists on Mozilla Hubs servers, and they don't have access to them. It's actually quite amazing how limited they are in terms of how limited Mozilla is in terms of knowing what's going on their servers. But it right now it's all public, it's all owned by Mozilla Hubs, but you can just get a Mozilla Hubs cloud, and it creates and manages all of the AWS resources, that's Amazon Web Services, needed to host your own immersive spaces from your company or organization's own account. So I have one, right? I have a Mozilla Hubs account on the Mozilla a Hubs cloud. Instead of saying Mozilla Hubs up here, it says MetaHood. That's my company. Right? I have a whole bunch of rooms here, which I have my own private office, and I have a gallery, which right now is, let me see. I need to find the link, and I probably should do that, but I don't want to stream going through the messages to get it. But that's okay. I'll pull it up later. We'll probably do like a 5-minute break, and then I'll get all those links going and stuff. Maybe at the end of the hour, if you guys are still around at 10 p.m., I'll show you some pretty cool examples. So this is my company, right? And I basically have changed many times as a company. MetaHood has changed many times. It's gone from, I'm going to build office places and rent them out, and galleries and rent them out, and I'll charge a monthly recurring subscription for access to the space. And then I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be more of a builder, right? I'm going to build these spaces and do custom builds. And now I'm actually pulling out of that, and part of what we're doing with what's happening right now, and part of the reason why we're here is because I decided that teaching about this space and consulting other companies about this space is probably going to be the bulk of my time and energy. I still will have custom builds available, and there are still rentals available, but all of my effort is going to be into running streams like this one, teaching people about what these spaces are. And that works super well for people and companies like Charles's, which is Utopia VR, which is a much more robust rental system than mine, right? They've been working a long time in getting these room rentals going, and you can go to their website, you can create an account, and you can have a membership that allows you to rent out these rooms. And they've got a yoga studio, they've got a yacht, they've got a gallery, they've got a mansion, and we're working on together to create their next level of rooms that are hopefully at a higher visual fidelity, and continue to help grow their company. So this is something that is like Utopia VR is built on Hubs Cloud, and MetaHood is built on Hubs Cloud. And Charles, feel very, very comfortable unmuting and correcting me if I've said anything funny. I got some audio there. So these are Hubs Cloud platform or Hubs Cloud products that allow us to have our own private Hubs Cloud stuff. Our own private immersive VR spaces where we're able to join the room, create rooms, create scenes, and connect with people. And I've been having all of my meetings in my office. Here's an example of my gallery, right? So this is MetaHood. And again, the frame rate sucks because I'm streaming to Twitch simultaneously. So you have to give it a little bit. But you can see, these are just 3D models and textures. I've got light bakes and the technology and the graphics that goes into these, this lighting and these designs is increasing all of the time. We have some, nice reflective floor. Shadows aren't working on it right now. That's a bit funny. The shadows are only working right there. So I probably just need to refresh. I think it's just, my computer's doing too many things at once. Because I have dynamic shadows and baked in shadows in this scene. We have this like ramp up here that goes to these gigantic projector screens where you can share your screen, you can share your camera, you can have interviews, you can have all this stuff. You can take the logo and you can throw it around, right? Oh, I dropped it. Throw it, yay! Throwing it through the air. But yeah, it's going so slow right now because I'm streaming 60 frames per second on Twitch. But that's kind of the top-down overview. Like companies are going to want this. It's an incredibly powerful and open source tool. There are many different metaverse companies that are going to be launched in the next year that you can either get a job at or that you can start yourself. That's something that we can teach you how to do, is to start your own company, your own metaverse company. And the way I've been looking at it is basically that Facebook's Meta has a huge financial head start and a huge marketing head start, because everybody learned about what the metaverse was because of Zuckerberg's hour-long video describing what Meta is, right? Now, people like me and Charles and some other people in this room have been working on the metaverse products for, I don't know how long you've been doing it, Charles, but for me, I started November last year. So this is 1 year, my company is 1 year old this month. It's the first birthday. And so much has changed and so much has happened in that year. And then at the end of it, Facebook announces that they're rebranding their entire company from Facebook to Meta. And my company's named is MetaHood, right? And so all of a sudden, overnight, everyone knew what it is that I'm doing. And Facebook and other Zuckerberg products and companies don't really have a great reputation for privacy. They don't really have a great reputation for health. They don't really have a great reputation for prioritizing the public health and safety. And they even have maybe had many opportunities to make better decisions, but have consistently chosen profit instead. And that's fine. They make a great tool. Facebook has changed the world in many ways, but it didn't always change the world in a good way. And so companies like Mozilla have had their feet in the dirt on building up Mozilla Hubs Cloud and Mozilla Hubs in order for them to have a David versus Goliath type relationship with the metaverse and with Meta, with Facebook's product. Now, it wasn't launched and called Facebook Meta before, but Mozilla Hubs has been building this up for some time. So that way there is an open source alternative to Facebook's Meta. Because the reality is Facebook's Meta is going to have a tremendous amount of people on it. There's going to be a lot of people there. And when there's a lot of people there and a lot of headsets there and stuff like that, then that makes it easier for you to connect with your family and friends to that platform. And so they have a huge advantage. But we don't want them to be the only metaverse. We don't want one individual to have complete control over Web3 for the foreseeable future. right? We want to be able to have alternative companies that are private or public or open source that are using these tools in order to have alternatives. It's the same thing as like, what if there was no websites? What if there was only Facebook pages? Well, that wouldn't be very cool. Facebook pages are sweet, like, every hair salon and barber and grocery store or whatever. I don't know if grocery stores need Facebook pages, but every company needs a Facebook page. That's true. But every company still has a website. But if Meta takes over everything, then there won't be any individual metaverses. There will only be Facebook's Meta. And we want to be a part of the reason why there's alternatives to that. So how's everyone feeling so far? Does that explain kind of what Web3 is and what Metaverse is? Can we open the floor a little bit for questions right now on these topics?
I think it makes sense. Kind of sounds cool.
Kind of sounds cool. I feel like it's super cool.
Cool.
Yeah,
I've got
cool.
a question about Fidelity and stuff like that.
Please.
Um, is there sort of a timeline? I assume the eventual goal is to make um, like the virtual space almost indistinguishable from reality.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
That's something that Unreal Engine and Unity are going to be closing the gap on, and they're working very quickly towards those goals with things like MetaHumans and Unity's acquisition of Weta. These are definitely things that are absolutely going to happen over a long enough period of time.
Yeah, my question was just going to be when would you ballpark I could throw on my Rift headset and sort of be like almost indistinguishable from real life? And another side question is I have a headset and I don't use it that often. The biggest issue being haptics.
Right.
That's for me sort of kicking me out of it. I'd be interested to know when you think. I know Facebook's doing something with $1 million gloves or something,
Yep.
but I'd be interested to hear what you expect timeline for haptics and fidelity would increase.
Yeah, so Fidelity, I don't know if we'll ever cross the line that's indistinguishable from reality. That's something that's the pioneer. That's like that's the innovative goal. Let's see if we can ever actually do it. That's a bit like, can we land humans on the moon, in the 60s? Yeah, sure, it will probably happen. But I don't know. I don't know if you'll ever be completely convinced. And certainly, maybe people that were born before VR headsets were mainstream may be convinced more easily than people that were born after. The same way when you show a video game to your grandma, she's like, wow, it looks so real, but all you see is polygons. The same thing will happen when you're a grandma or grandpa or whatever. And the kids will be able to see that's nowhere near close to reality, but for us, it may be more convincing. I can see that, that door being closed inside of this decade. We'll see what happens. In terms of haptic feedback, there are a lot of teams working on stuff like that all over the world, especially in Europe. And Facebook's doing stuff too. So it is a very difficult problem to solve. It's basically a system of sensory replacement, and sensory replacement for the eyes and the ears, super duper easy compared to the tens of millions of nerve endings that you have wrapping around your entire body. So and then after that, we'll be like, okay, so when are we going to be able to taste VR? And it may be a thing like the movies where it's just, it never gets to that place. It's just something where, they wondered when smell-o-vision was going to come out. And it's just like, yeah, no, it just may never, that may not be for the medium. So I would say there's going to, but I think haptic feedback is absolutely coming. And we'll see big innovations on that inside of 3 to 5 years for sure. I think, Christmas time is when a lot of these things end up getting pushed out to market when a company has enough product that they've developed or invented and manufactured in order to hit the mass market. So you can kind of measure this by Christmases. I'm be completely spitballing. I have no real idea, but I would say we're maybe 4 Christmases away from something like hitting more mainstream market in terms of haptic feedback. And it would probably start with gloves. But there's also really interesting air pressure systems as well.
I just want to point out that I've been paying close attention to a company called Ultraleap. They just opened some funding, and they got 82 million US dollars to develop the prototype of what they were showing as hand tracking. I'll share the link with Connor in the Discord so you guys can see. But if it's anything like the video, like, it's really impressive. But hands free, I think, is the way to go, especially for gaming, because last thing anybody wants is more gear on them when they're playing games.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, drop that in the chat, man, in the All3D chat. That'd be perfect. So if there, I'm happy to take any other questions, but after that top-down view, I want to start talking about like these spaces specifically, how they're built, how optimized they have to be, how the lighting works, and how all this stuff happens. But I'm happy to take any other questions before moving into that category.
Can you elaborate on your monopolization point? Like, what's a world where, if you could give two universes of like, what's a world where Facebook monopolizes it versus like it's more spread out?
Sure.
Like, and another question, is it similar to liking a page on Facebook? Like, how do you, if Facebook monopolized, how do you get exposed? So let's say like Nike has an account, how do they get exposed versus like some Joe Schmo metaverse that's, yeah.
What do you mean by exposed?
How do people discover you? Similar to how you go on Facebook or Instagram, how do people discover your content?
Totally.
Is it better? Is it worse?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a super interesting question. So to describe the first one, the two universes, on one end, like, in the dystopian future, you have a single tech company that doesn't, has its own laws. It violates the privacy laws and many other moral standards that the rest of society tend to have, or tend to, let's be honest about it, tend to pretend to value, right? And so it's like we all really care about privacy, but we all got Facebook accounts. We all knew that these things were happening, but we continued to support them. We all knew that so it's one of those things where it's like, as a culture, we talk about valuing privacy, but in our actions, we don't so much. And it's basically because we haven't been burned, right? There's been a couple of bad things that have happened. There's been some leaks. There's been an increase in depression. There's been an increase in polarization, political polarization that, companies like Facebook probably didn't create. That political polarization was probably always there, but that they didn't do anything to help, right? And they even made it worse, right? So this is one of those things where it's like that particular company benefited from higher levels of engagement, whether that engagement was authentic or not, or let's say honest or not, whether it was misinformation or not. They benefit from an increase of engagement, and so they have not prioritized anything but increase in engagement, and that has led some of our less angelic characteristics of being human beings to really thrive and flourish. And as well as the more angelic sides of our human being characteristics. The good and the evil has both thrived so well on these social media networks that have only cared about engagement. So if you take that to a metaverse world, like, that would allow basically the majority of human activity on the internet to be monetizable. Right? Where I look at is monetizable. Where I walk to is monetizable, right? Everything that I visit, and they can funnel that into any direction to put forward any message that they'd like. If there's a whole bunch of, privacy leaks and all of the Web3 was on Facebook's Meta, how would we even know about it? Is that something that we would go into YouTube and old school and watch a 2D video? I don't, because this is going to happen. It's like watching a 2D video is going to feel old school very soon, right? And so, or how about like if I'm running, a barber shop and I've got my Facebook page, and then all of a sudden the algorithm changes and it sinks all of my engagement, and I lose all of my activity, and my business starts to get affected and my livelihood starts to get affected. But I'm too small for any big corporation, any massive technology company to care or notice. And this is another thing that it brings a lot of opportunity for influence and sway into a very small amount of people. And just in general, and democratic societies and Western societies, we tend to think of this as a problem. We tend to think of this as a bad thing. We tend to think of competition as a very good thing, and that it gives opportunities for you to leave that platform and join another one if it has wronged you in some way, or if it is not advantageous for you to stay there, or if there's more advantages on the other side, there's more services on the other side. If they're the only, imagine like www being owned by an individual. That would be nuts. That would be a real problem. I really hope that individual has a really good track record of being a good person. And we don't really see that in Facebook's meta, right? So that's kind of the one side. On the other side, you have this completely decentralized, open source. Everyone has their own metaverse, right? A metaverse for everyone is actually Utopia VR's slogan. It's got a TM next to it. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But it's a metaverse for everyone, which means that you can rent your own office, you can have your own space, you can run your own company, you can have your own metaverse that is able to be distributed to the people you like, the same way we have our own Discord server, right? But it would be like if we had our own Discord app, right? And so it's not just, I have my own Discord server, but technically all of this data that's going through Discord servers is on Discord servers. It does, I think it does belong to them. We'd have to read the end user license agreement to see where the actual property lines are and the ownership lines. But I'm pretty sure that this all belongs to Discord, and we use it because Discord hasn't done anything that's betrayed our trust. But if in this world, Mozilla is actually making a platform that says that you can have your own Discord, you can have your own Discord, you can have your own metaverse, you can have your own metaverse. And, well, talking about engagement and getting exposure, well, that's the same as just a website. How do people find your website? Like you have your own website. Now you can post that on social media. You can send that out in an email. You have your own email list. You can create YouTube videos. You can have a Discord server. There's 10,000 different ways to get people to your website, just like there will be 10,000 ways to get people to your metaverse. And it will be that Nike's metaverse is more popular than yours. That's probably just the way it's going to go, unless you can give more value from your brand to consumers than Nike does, in which case your metaverse will be more popular than Nike's does. But it's more of a meritocracy. What can you do to bring in the most people or to engage the most people is going to be your competitive edge as a metaverse world owner. But you will be the owner. It will be yours. What's so cool about Hubs Cloud is that it's actually yours. Now, I was talking to the software developers at Mozilla Hubs. Am I sharing the right screen here? I think so. Yeah, I'm sharing. Oh, okay, yeah, it's cool. I'm sharing myself, but that's all right. What's super interesting about Hubs Cloud and how hands-off Mozilla has been about this is that I've talked to the developers there. We meet on Fridays, and they don't even know how many Hubs Clouds they've sold. They have no idea how many consumers they have. They have no idea. They run into new projects all the time, and they're like, whoa, this is on Mozilla Hubs? That's so cool. Like, they don't even know how this is being used, let alone tracking it, categorizing the data, archiving the data, and using that to build these massive individual profiles on every single consumer, so that way they can continue to sell products to them, even at the cost of their own mental health. When anxiety and depression goes up, so does consumer purchases. So it's not really disadvantageous to have all of your consumers sad and anxious, because it actually makes more money, right? And so companies like Facebook don't care if you're sad or anxious. It may actually be beneficial to them if you are. Versus companies like Mozilla, they don't even know who you are. They have no idea. They are selling a toolkit with blindfolds on, right? And what you do with that toolkit is whatever you can do with that toolkit. And yeah, so to answer your question about discovery, is it ends up being a process of like, okay, what do you do with this toolkit then? Like, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to make cool ass spaces that bring people in? If you want to have a space for your D&D community, Like, are you going to put it in a cave or a dungeon? Is there going to be a hoard of gold and a dragon breathing on it? And you can have, your DM, your dungeon master games, your D&D games in this awesome environment. Well, then that's how people are going to discover you. You're going to send that to them. You're going to invite them to that little room, and you're going to have the best, coolest games ever, right? It beats D&D on Zoom, right? Or if you're a new startup company and you want to have like a really cool culture that says, hey, we're a startup company, this is the product we make, and we're all a team here, and you want to have your team meetings on a pirate ship, and then you can do that, and it makes it a lot more engaging, a lot more interesting, a lot more fun than having it on Zoom. Right? And we just don't want one company to be in charge of all of it. And Mozilla is so cool because even though they have this product that is so large and so awesome, they're not in charge of it. They're just building it and sending it out. It's open source. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and more so. Yes.
Awesome. Great. Any other like top level questions before I start getting into the nuts and bolts of this stuff?
Do you think as developers we should think about like Zoom fatigue? Considering that.
Hell yes. Yes, absolutely. No, go ahead. Can finish, please.
Oh yeah, like this. I'm not as going to sure whether it's like the responsibility of Mozilla or the responsibility of like individual developers to think about how we could possibly solve that problem. It's kind of a hard one, but just something to think about, I guess.
Totally.
It was more like an open question.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the answers right now, but just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think this is the answer, because if you check this out, so one of the things that they found out through studies that Zoom fatigue comes from seeing a whole bunch of faces at once. Now, in a 3D space, like in the real world, when you have a whole bunch of people that you're talking to, some faces are closer and some faces are further back. We don't see all of the faces with an overwhelming amount of facial expression and detail all at once. So hours of looking at many, many different faces, and your brain is just analyzing the body language of every single face. It can get tiring, right? And so one of the things that happens with these metaverse like companies and products is that you see this face. That's me, right? That's going to be a lot less taxing on your hardware, like your brain hardware, in order to break down these facial expressions. There's still going to be voice. I can still share my screen and plug in my webcam and put it on the wall there, right? I can still have this, but Zoom fatigue does basically come from just we have the hardware in our brain for facial recognition is just getting asked for too much compared to all the human history until 2020, right? So I think that this as a design, like as a product, solves that. But yes, as designers and developers, we need to be cognizant of exactly how much information we are delivering to the users. And one of the things that is quite interesting that isn't Zoom fatigue, but is a different type of fatigue in these metaverse spaces, is being able to hear so many people at once. Because this has spatial audio. So if I'm talking on this side of the room and I walk to the other side of the room, it's actually going to be a bit quieter. The further I get, the quieter it is. But this needs to happen in a like super realistic fall off way. Otherwise you've got like 12 people, 12 conversations going on at once. And that can be super difficult to delineate. Some people are better at it. If you have experience as like a DJ, then you're probably pretty good at listening to these different sounds and delineating the different stuff. But if you're, not, or if you just, there are people with a different attention. I want to use the correct terminology here, but abilities to focus and attention, attention to, the ability to differentiate between things of focus, right? So that's hey Sage, how you doing?
Hey, good. Hey Connor, thanks for the invite. Sorry I'm late.
No worries, all good. Yeah, okay, perfect. There was a bunch of noise on your channel. I just wanted to see if it would denoise automatically.
No problem.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, so there are a bunch of different characteristics of attention and that we need to consider that designers and developers need to be Accessibility is going to be at the forefront of design. We want to make sure that these spaces are as accessible to as many people as possible, and that actually means not designing for the broad part of the bell curve, but actually designing for the extreme ends of the bell curve, right? So it's a bit like the expression that I love to, that the analogy that's super duper useful for understanding how these accessibility design concepts should be used or thought about is, most people don't need the sidewalk ramp. When at the end of an intersection, most people are fine with a curb, right? You can just step onto it, but that excludes everyone in a wheelchair. So we decided to, as a society, we decided to make it a law that your sidewalks have to be lowered to the floor in that on-ramp area, so that way people with wheelchairs can have accessibility to the sidewalks as well. But then after that, when we design for that extreme use case, even though most people aren't in wheelchairs, when we design for the people that are in wheelchairs, well, who amongst us hasn't benefited from that? Pushing a stroller, pushing a cart, pulling luggage, like even just, at any time you need it, we've all used them, right? So when you design for the extreme use case for the people that are maybe have color deficiencies or focus issues or are on a spectrum or a range of neuro, I actually don't know the terminology for it, but the people that are on the autistic spectrum and just there's a neuro category for of people that have have been diagnosed with different neuro
I think it's like neurodiversity.
That's
It's
the
like a
word.
new
Thank you
word.
so much. Thank you. Yeah, for the range of neurodiversity that humans offer. So when you design for the extreme ends, that everyone in the middle benefits from that, and that is something that you want to keep in your mind, that we want to make this accessible to everybody, and we don't want to exclude anyone in this new space. But what's really quite cool is just by nature, this is far more accessible, right? Because, if you identify as a man or a woman or as a penguin, it doesn't matter, because you can have your avatar be whatever it is that you like. You can have your coworkers see you as you would like to be seen, instead of whatever your physical self really looks like, right? And that provides a lot of opportunity for authentic connection. That provides a lot of a lot of accessibility to people that are, maybe not in the bulk of the bell curve, but it is happening. Like there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for everyone to feel themselves in these spaces, to be able to hear everyone, see everyone, and be respected as they'd like to be seen as they'd like to be seen, and heard as they'd like to be heard. So there are, like a whole range of avatars here that are just by default. You've got dancing GIFs as well that you can use as your avatars. You've got a bird and Santa or Christmas themed one. All these types of crazy different things, and people are making these all the time. And you absolutely can have a character modeler type position, maybe just an avatar creator, right? And they're quite cool because when you talk in them, their mouths move, or you can have you can rig it to being audio sensitive, so that way not only does the mouth move, which right now you can see my mouth is moving right as I'm talking. Not only does the mouth move, but maybe, in those robot versions, their head gets larger. You can have a green silhouette appear. It's all about design, and you can create these avatars that do this different types of features and all that stuff with those accessibility requirements. But yeah, the tenets of accessibility, keeping those at the forefront of your design decisions and building around it. It just happens to be that these spaces are like really conducive to that kind of thing. It's really it's a much more accessible world than the real one, I'll say.
So thank you for answering that. Yeah, that's good enough.
Great. No worries. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so we're about to wrap up an hour. I'm happy to keep going for like another half hour, 45 minutes, but I did intend for this to be about an hour. So if you guys have to jet or you want to get in a question before we move on, before I move on to the next topic, totally let me know what it is you're thinking, what it is your question's about. Okay. I'm going to go with the 30 seconds of silence means that everyone feels content and answered. I hope that's true. But if not, just unmute, just shout out. Don't worry about it.
I had a question, and you could save it for later if it doesn't fit the theme of this meeting. But, you know, I teach high school kids, and you're helping prepare them for future career opportunities. And as this idea of the metaverse grows and interactive media grows, what are some of the skill sets you think students should have or could have? What are your predictions for the future of employment in these types of areas, whether it's developing environments, accessibility, as you had talked about? Yeah, just curious as to your thoughts on that.
That's such a great question. Thank you so much. And welcome, Anthony. I didn't see you pop in there, so welcome. That is a great question. I did allude to this a little bit earlier, but I see there's being so much opportunity in this space that it's almost like no matter what the high school students choose to do, there's going to be an opportunity to do that thing in the metaverse. You know, outside of like massage therapy, metaverse is covering a whole lot of bases, right? So for me, I come from a film and episodic TV and 3D animation background. So my specialties were modeling, texturing, shading, lighting, rendering, those type of skill sets, those type of what let's call it traditional 3D generalist skill sets or entertainment skill sets. Animation is obviously going to be huge. There's nothing animating in this world right now, but having a few seagulls fly by, or a few not seagulls, I guess they wouldn't be in the mountains, but having eagles fly by here and actually having them animate, for that you would need modeling, rigging, animation, texturing, and shading, jobs, employees, or a single generalist that can do all of those things. And definitely generalists are coming, the use case and the usability of generalists is going way up, as this is such a new territory. A lot of companies need people that can do a tremendous amount of things, just enough in everything, instead of like the film industry now, where it's like, you have to be really good at that specific type of creature character sculpting in order to get a job on that new movie, or of compositing for or post-processing for the specific game engine for a specific technical art position at a major game studio. As these industries get larger and more ambitious and they take on more and more employees, it goes from needing to be very generalist to very specialist, right? Over the course of could be 50 years, the industry will go from someone that needs to know how to shoot, direct, act, and edit, and produce and write and all that stuff, all the way down to, an Avengers movie is made by like 2,000 people or more. Sometimes it's like 2,500 people go by in the credits, and each person has a very specific task. So when we enter into the metaverse, it's like, well, we're back at square zero again. Like we need somebody that can model, texture, light, rig, and render all this stuff, because there's not enough people in the space right now. So we need people that can do everything. Over time, we'll be able to specialize for sure. But it is an open market. Traditional 3D, I say traditional 3D because, this is the new world. It was newer tech to be to consider that 3D artists would be working on, students at the high school level would be working on their 3D art skills. That was like, 10, 15 years ago, that was like an incredible thing to be doing. But now it's kind of like, I think, the modeling tools and photogrammetry tools that are coming out, to even just on the iPad. The iPad has amazing photogrammetry tools. The iPad is now able to paint on 3D models in a way that competes with Substance Painter now. Like all of a sudden, these tools are just like hyper accessible. So painting in 3D, modeling in 3D, sculpture, drawing, illustration, design, development, coding, like coding and developers, that is something that everybody needs, right? It's never going to go away. So there's just, so much amount of opportunity. I mean, even if your students wanted to pursue a career in art therapy or just even mental health, well, then great. Then they won't be the one building the space. They'll be the one renting the space from a company like Utopia VR. And they'll have that opportunity to have a metaverse space. But yeah, it's huge. So I think the biggest and most best thing that you could teach any high school student right now is creative problem solving.
Mhm.
And that's probably been the case since always. Since we left the factories, the best thing that you can teach a human is creative problem solving, because basically everything else that isn't creative problem solving is going to get eaten by AI.
I'm kind of a non-traditionalist in that I point the students towards the tools, give them a little bit of support, and then I feel like, why recreate the wheel on tutorials and how-tos when 50 billion people have already done that? And you're teaching students to be self-sufficient and critical thinkers and problem solvers. And so here's the tools that you have access to. Now create whatever it is you need to create. Like you said, solve that problem. And I think the key is ensuring that students have access to the tools or know the tools exist, that we don't narrow them to Google Apps for education only or Microsoft education tools only, that we really push to leverage open source technologies like Mozilla Hubs and other technologies. And yeah, for my students, it's like a general overview of everything we can. And then in high school, you don't really know, most of the time, you don't know what you want to do, when
Right.
you want to do it. So you just expose them to as much as you possibly can. And then after high school, they decide where to go. But I inform them very frequently about all these massive updates and news that's happening in these spaces and how many job opportunities are out there for students who, we live in a really remote area. Like there's only so many jobs here, but these students could be working for companies, organizations, startups that are anywhere in the world. And it's really exciting. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. No, yeah, and thank you for that good work that you're doing. I think you're exactly right. Exposing them to the tools and letting them experiment is going to be some of the most valuable education you can offer. The only thing that I would say maybe be able to juice it up a little bit more is expose them to the tools as a byproduct of trying to get them to a goal. So for me, like my goal with this space here is to create a beautiful rectangle because it's viewed on the browser. I want to create a comfortable, nice, warm, professional feeling rectangle, right? And then I can use, well, how are we going to do that? Well, you can use this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool. You can use any of these tools that you want, but it's a little bit more, it does help focus in on the creative learning and the creative problem solving, because it's like, you give somebody a hammer and some nails and some wood and say, have at it. It's awesome. They're going to get good practice hammering nails. They're going to bang their fingers. They're going to nail some stuff together. But on the other side of that, saying like, okay, we have a goal in mind. We want to build a chair or a shed or something like that. These are all the different tools. Now experiment in the purpose and direction of building the chair, right? And then it will help, I think, because you'll see the result, and whether the result is closer or further away from the goal will be the data that you use to make decisions about how to use the tools again in the future. And I think that may be something, and I'm sure you're doing that already. You do have a goal in mind, but I would say, prioritizing the goal is going to be the biggest thing. Secondary is the tools. And then, and then third down the list is tutorials and training on how to use those tools or whatever, which you're going to need a little bit of so people aren't lost. But yeah, I totally agree with you. The inversion of that is kind of how most education happens right now. And that's why most education isn't as effective as it could be.
I love that you both hit on. I was going to jump in and say something to Anthony. And Connor immediately stepped in and said, have them set goals, which is hilarious because my field of study is neurogamification in the field of education. And so goal setting and is one of many principles that can actually help drive retention and excitement. And, the better that we can do these things, right? So in high academics right now, it's not a measure of making sure people retain as much as they can. It's about giving them a fun way, right, to retain it quickly and move on to something else. This way they can be instructive and then creative, instructive and then creative. And this way it gives the instructors a lot of time to help the people who need the help in a very targeted way, but also to expand upon all of the things that people love, to drive the passion to move into different things. And I love that what you pointed out, Anthony. You're absolutely correct. People no longer have to move away from their families and loved ones and the people they grew up with just because they want like a decent paying job or they want a career in a particular field. And I think if you apply, both education and gamification, and of course, I'm just seeing the world as I am in this scenario. I think Metaverse has a lot of interesting applications that I wasn't really thinking about until today. So, yeah, I love it.
Thanks for adding that, Sean. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. Are there any other kind of theory questions that we can talk about? Or are you guys even interested in the nuts and bolts of how these things are modeled? I think so. I think Yuri, you probably are.
Oh yes, I
Okay.
am.
Yeah.
See how
Okay,
it'll
let's
work.
do it. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is a space that I built that uses 32-bit texture, 32-bit texture light maps. So you can see that this light on the wall is actually baked into that texture. It's baked into a texture. And then we have tileable materials here all over the ground, right? And we have this fun little plant in the corner, which is done using an atlas map plus light bakes. So what does that actually look like? Well, it's all done in Blender, okay? Everything's done in Blender. And I can no longer see you guys, so if someone could just unmute and let me know. Can you guys read this text? Is it all clear?
Yeah, I can see it.
Very clear.
Awesome.
Can you actually open a file with existing environments?
You
that
bet.
We can just
That's
see?
exactly what I'm on to. So this is my office. And I'll show you two different versions. I'll show you an older version right here and the newer version and kind of show you kind of where the technology was a year ago and where the technology is now. So like I was saying, it's all done in Blender. There's my office with the half sphere on it, right? And if I just flip this into textured mode, you can see there's my sky dome type thing. It's not actually, it's not a light source. It's just an image with a flat shader on it. And then if I pop into here, this is not pretty. Let me just switch this over. Here we go. Let me reset my camera. My camera's already, oh, there we go. I've got, textures on the wall, and let me pop into the shader group so you guys can see how this is set up. It is super simple. We just have a principal BSDF, which is basically like an AI standard in Blender, or, the V-Ray standard material or anything. It's just a standard like PBR material. It has base color and metallicism, right? And roughness, specular roughness, and it has sheen, which is pretty cool. It's got normal maps applied to it and transmission and all that stuff. Just kind of the standard a shader, PBR shader system. And on this, I have a walls map. And if I just open this up, I'm gonna go to my image editor. And this is what my wall texture looks like. And it's not that big. It's a 2K map. Okay, and this is probably one of the largest maps I have in here because I wanted to have the detail on the wall. Now, the tileable floor here the tileable floor is only 512. It's this tiny little 512 map. And so now we have one 2K map on the walls, one 512 map on the floor that's just tiled a bunch of times. If you look at the UV editor here, and let me just set this to the floor. What is it called? Fabric floor, diffuse. And I'll select all of the polygons of the floor. Oh, that's the nav mesh actually. Let me just.
Is that a flat shaded texture too, Connor?
It is not. It's a PBR material.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a physically based rendering material. So it actually has specularity and metalness and all that fun stuff. But it's the reason why, we used to have to use flat shaders with light baked maps, but now with the latest updates from, Mozilla's DOM, basically, we can now have integration of light baked maps, of light bakes on PBR materials, which wasn't a thing before. Before, if you had a light bake, it had to be a flat unlit material, which is what this world is outside. That's a flat unlit material. And you can see it's plugged into a background node, which is the same as like a surface shader in Maya. And it's just, straight in, and there's nothing else to it. It goes straight to the surface. But this floor is actually a PBR material, and it has a base color, and it could have had a specular roughness, but the specular roughness for these different areas of the fabric is basically the same. There is some variety there that would be nice to have, but if I actually look at the room here, it's not something that I really need that level of detail and variation on the roughness on this. It would be nice, but this is actually so rough. It looked weird. I had it before, but it looked shiny and weird. And so right now the roughness is at 0.924. And so there's just not enough contrast in there to warrant it. Same with the table. I could have little fingerprints and handprints and roughness variation on it, and that would make it nicer. But would it make it so much nicer that it's worth loading in another 512 map? Maybe I should use those extra 512 resolution texture maps and just use a higher resolution light bake map instead. Because I think the lighting is going to be slightly more important than the roughness of the table. And these are optimization priorities that I make on a case-by-case basis.
Connor, if you bake your light map at a high res, will you reduce it before publishing?
If I have to. But I would love to have the highest possible resolution light bake maps that possible, because I find that the lighting is one of the key ingredients into making these spaces feel really alive and warm and emotional. Lighting is emotion. If you have a dark and scary red light, it's very different than if you have a very soft and kind nostalgic pink light. So the lighting ends up being so critical in order for it to feel a certain way that I have my lights as the highest priority resolution possible.
Would that be 2K, or would you go higher?
In this one, I think I'm at 2Ks on these, but I have many 2Ks. So if I just pop back over to the file editor, file browser, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 light maps, but it's actually this one and this one are combined. So it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 light maps. And the table, let's see how big this one is. Details, does it tell me? It doesn't. Let me just open this folder up.
Yeah, I'd be curious what your final size was for your scene 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's find out.
While you're looking, I did a bake last night at 4K.
Mm-hmm.
It took all night.
Mm-hmm.
And then I reduced it down to 2K and still got really nice shadow, really nice diffusion on the shadows. But if I went lower, I started to get, artifacts.
Yeah, for sure. I do bake as high as possible and then reduce if necessary. But there are some cool denoising stuff that you can do inside of Blender. That's people like doing it. I don't like doing it. I have a second computer that I will put in the corner of my room, and I will render a light bake map at 4K at 256 samples for 5 days straight.
Will you use the denoiser on the render settings, or will you not denoise at all?
I don't denoise at all. I use a tremendous amount of samples and just wait.
Okay, thank you.
So the floor is a 1K texture. I'm actually surprised. I thought it would be bigger, but the floor is a 1K texture, and it definitely does the trick. You know, you have this this really nice light bleeding. If I go into the other room here, you can see that really nice gradient that just goes from left all the way to right. It's nice and smooth, and it's only 1K. So we actually, that's in this room right here, and you can't see it as well here just because this is a 32-bit image, which means we have more data in every pixel than can be displayed. But if I just lower the exposure on that, you can see that these gradients are inside of this texture, right? It's just a 32-bit image, so you need to do a trick to expose it. But you can see it's quite grainy. It's not like the best in the world. But where do you see that here?
UV map, Connor? Do you use separate UV maps for each one of your light map?
Sure do. But it is typically based off of the original. Because if I have a UV map that is able to tile this texture all the way across this entire floor without any scale issues, without any pinching, you know, without any disruption to the tile, well, then that's probably a really good UV set to use to bake onto. And so the only difference that I do is I just make it fit. So if this is my floor, and I'll pop open my UVs here, my UV editor, and you see that that's my light bake map. That's my light map. And this is my UV map. Is it almost exactly the same? My UV map is just a straight down projection. And then if I change that to the light map, it's the same straight down projection, but I've cut it on the doors there, so it will fit a little bit better. And originally I was going to put the table here, but then I decided that I wanted the table on its own, on its own light map. And this is the UV map for the table. You can see that the texture is even, like it's even textile density for the top and the bottom. Let's see.
Are you packing it just with the pack UV options in Blender, or do you use a add-on for packing?
I do it all by hand.
I do it all by hand. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's because like those UV packing tools, like the light map pack, that's the fastest way to like ruin the texture on your model. They're just really ugly. They're very efficient, but they're really, really ugly. So for this one, I literally I use the Smart UV project. Those are really nice. So what you can do is for something like this, like I'll cut the seams on these corners. I'll cut the seams from the top and the bottom. So that, and then that, and then, you know, look at the UV map. This is the result. This is actually not true because this particular model was something that came with the texture. So it was already unwrapped to fit. It's a photogrammetry scan. So this texture is actually unwrapped to fit that. So I didn't actually unwrap this one, but these ones, for example, you know, it's the same thing. Just unwrapping it around the edge of the seam and then unfolding that and smoothing that out. And so it's as even as possible. That's my UV map, right? And if I change the scale on these, then you can see the scale of the texture is changing, right? And if I make it higher, then it's like even really, really fine. So I try to find the level that feels as realistic as possible. When you are doing this scaling and texturing with tiled textures, that job is what determines the scale of the model, the perceived scale, right? The perceived scale, not the actual scale, but how big it looks. Because if I go like this, all of a sudden these look like little toy chairs, right? Because we determine scale based off of the texture density. And if I undo that, well, now they feel like more full-size chairs. And you can do the same thing with, like, you know, the floor. If I pop over to the UV map and I make this like way smaller, all of a sudden it's like, this might be a toy office now, right? Versus if I have it huge, then this feels about real scale. And if I go even bigger than that, it's like it starts to feel like we're in a gigantic office where we're these tiny little people, you know, like because that scale right there is what determines, you know, that's our brain's perception trick to figure out how big of a room we're in. So having that texture scale and that texture density on your tiled maps is of critical importance to really hone that in. And I might even make it a little bit bigger because it's nicer to be a little bit denser, right? It looks a little bit higher quality. Even though it's not changing anything in optimization, it's not changing anything in texture resolution. It's just how many times it's tiled. But then once that's unwrapped, you know, they're all overlapping. It doesn't matter here. Then I'll just take each one and I'll pack them all out. I'll resize them and pack them all out so that they're as efficient as possible. Now, like I come from the film and TV animation industry where we don't just click buttons and have it work. Like we really need to make sure that every single UV and polygon is mapped in a non-distorted, uniform way that allows, you know, the director to take a camera move and go like this with it, or get like really close to underneath the chair, right? And it's like, why would this be the same resolution as everywhere else? Well, because the director might want to put a camera underneath the chair. And if they want to do that, then you need to have the texture resolution to support that. So in film and TV, that's critical. They texture everything from every angle all the way through. In games, they do less of that. You might have less texture on the bottom than you do on the top. But that's starting to change now too, as game engines, you know, real-time and offline rendering like ray tracing and path tracing, the line between them is blending and blurring because game engines like Unreal Engine are getting super advanced in what they can do in real time. Plus, they now have the ability to raycast and ray trace. And the real-time engines or the traditional path tracing engines like Arnold and stuff like that are getting faster at doing these calculations on a frame-by-frame basis. And so all this stuff is starting to blend. But, you know, to answer your question in a more simple way, like nothing beats doing it by hand. It takes maybe 5 times longer, but that's actually an advantage because when all of your competition is doing the 5 times faster ways that look like crap, you'll be doing the 5 times slower ways that make your stuff look amazing, that make people go, how the hell did you do this? Well, it took me 5 times longer to do. That's why. You know, and you get really fast at this. I can't tell you how fast I am at unwrapping. It's stupid. Like it's like you put on a podcast, you have a cup of coffee, it's a rainy day, and you unwrap the whole scene in 4 hours, and then you move on with your life. And instead, people are using these automatic unwrap tools that get done instantly, but then they deal with it in texturing, they deal with it in lighting, they deal with it, and they over and over and over and over again. And every time you take a problem and move it into the next department over, it scales 10x in your ability to solve that problem, right? So if you do good unwraps, texturing is easy. If you do bad unwraps, texturing is 10 times harder. So take the time, do it right.
Connor, would you mind showing us your shade node editor or what you do to get it into Mozilla with these light maps? I'm assuming that you have a setup for each light map for each material.
Yes, I do. I have got this right here. So it's. I mean, are you're just talking about the network in order to get it to be red, right?
Yeah, just the final, you know, now that you kind of went through the unwrapping and the texturing, you know, I'm skipping right to it. How do you get it out of Blender and into
Totally.
Hubs?
So you need the add-on, and I'm sure you know that already, but for everyone else, you need an add-on. It's the Hubs Blender Exporter. So all you got to do is pop over to Google and type in Hubs Blender Exporter. And then if you hit the first link, it's going to be GitHub. It's going to be the Mozilla Reality Hubs Blender Exporter. And then you just hit code and you hit download zip. When you download that zip, you go over to here and you install it, and you go to wherever you downloaded it. You select the zip. You don't even need to unzip it. You just select the zip and add it, and then it appears in here. Now that's the Hubs Blender Exporter, right? So you want to turn that on. You check it on, and when you check it on, if you export out a GLB, so let me just export out this table. It's got a light bake map on it. So I'll go File. Let me just do the whole. I'll do the table and the floor. So, and these chairs, why not? So it's a few different light maps, a few different materials. And I go to File, Export, GLB. GLB is the file format that basically all of these metaverse platforms are going to be using. GLBs are a bit like the JPEG version of a 3D model. And then I'll just plug this in here into my GLB, and I'll call this demo. And I will include the selected objects only, right? I will, you can apply modifiers. You can keep you want to keep the UVs, you want to keep the normals. I don't need vertex colors, but you can leave that on, but sometimes it can create problems. So I, by habit, take it off. Animation, I don't have any animation, but you can export animation in GLB formats. And then this one right down here, extensions, I want to turn on the Hubs component add-on, right? That's the one that we downloaded from GitHub, and it appears right here. I check that on. And what that does is when I hit export, it exports it great, but that add-on will go through every single material in the materials list, and it will look for this Moz Lightmap node. This is a Mozilla Lightmap node, right? And you can add this in. You see down here, it says Hubs. That appears there because I've added the add-on. And I can just, that's Shift A to hit add, and then I add it in, and then I can plug it in. Now, you may notice, if you have a keen eye, that by default it comes in at 1.0. And this one here I have at 3.14. Now, there are some... We're still getting to the bottom of this of which one is right, 1 or 3 or pi, right? But there are some developers at 3JS and some posts about this on their forums, on their GitHub, that talk about pi being the physically accurate volume, or the physically accurate level to set your intensity to. And others say, no, you should bake that into the light and we should leave this at 1.0. And so I'm not really sure where we resolved on this. Some people think it's pi and some people think it's 1.0. This whole scene is set up to pi because at the time, pi was the solution. Now, a few, like a month and a half later, people are going, no, pi is not the right value. What it basically determines is how bright these are. It's either multiplied by 3.14 or it's multiplied by 1. I kind of like the way it looks at multiplied by 3.14. It looks good. Look, I'm happy with it. So I'm
Connor,
going with pi.
Would you mind jumping to your world environment and showing us your HDR that you baked the scene with, and did you adjust the exposure on the world texture?
I didn't bake in the world. I actually am just lighting it.
Just lighting, okay.
Yeah. So I have a huge area light right here, right? And I have a huge area light there. And I have a directional light that's pretty soft coming in. And then I have emissive lights coming from the ceiling. This is an emissive shader, right? So if I just plug into the... Yeah, I have an Atlas texture for that. Oops. Let me just see.
Is your emission just at 1 value also?
I think it's higher.
Okay.
My emission's at 10.
Oh.
Yeah, so these lights on the ceiling are blasting. Right, and that's basically. I also have a couple of area lights in the hallway. Like I have this area light here that's illuminating the back because it was getting real dark. If I walk over here, you can see that it's a little bit brighter than it should be there, like physically, because you can see it starts to get real dark. And then I'm just pointing a light there. It's right there. You can see it. But it's just so that way it doesn't feel darker than it should be. It's not realistic, but it doesn't matter. Same with on this side. This wall was pretty dark. I have a whole bunch of lights behind the logo here.
And is it 3.14 for all your intensity?
On my light maps, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just found out that other people aren't setting it up like that. So I don't really know where we ended up with that conversation, whether it's 3.14 or 1. But yeah, but on this scene, everything's at pi. And so this, I've got a couple of point lights back here. And if I just switch this into Eevee, you'll be able to see.
By the way, Connor, the lighting just really beautiful in this scene. Some of the subtleties in the shading in the hallway too, especially in the dark areas.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. Lighting is my absolute favorite thing to do. So that's where I'm spending a lot of my creative energy. So if I just do a quick little cycles render, I don't know if it's lagging crazy for you guys, my voice or anything. Just let me know if it's killing the stream, because I am rendering at the same time. But you can see that, you know, this is just lit traditionally. I don't have an HDRI in here. I just have area lights placed in clever positions and a directional light that's shining this pool of light on the floor and on the wall, in order to get it to feel as nice as possible. I wanted it to feel warm and welcoming. I wanted it for the users when they walk into the room to have that, wow, it's so bright, it's so beautiful. Like I wanted the wow right here. Right? And this is one of those things that is actually a really important point when talking and thinking about designing spaces, is that yes, you are doing 3D models. These are designed in 3D and all that stuff, but they're distributed on rectangles. They're still rectangles, right? So it's still, I mean, unless you're in a VR headset, in which case it's a semi-sphere, which is another design principle. But one of the design principles that I have here, my 101 design priorities, is if we are making virtual spaces, we create the opportunity for amazing virtual photography that documents awesome event experiences. That's what we're doing, right? So when I have this right here, and you can take a selfie, like I can whip out a camera, boop. All I have to do is hit C, and a camera will appear. Oh, it's lagging. I think it's because I'm rendering. Am I rendering back here? Let me see. Uh-oh, I asked for it too much. There we go. Loaded in a camera. And I can take a little shot here of myself. I'll click the camera. I'll stand back in the office. And I'll go, hey, that's me. That's the picture. And it takes a little photo. That photo appears in the room. Awesome. I've got that photo. Of course, now I can tweet this. I can share this. I can put this on Instagram. And this is the marketing and advertising of my space, right? So if I'm considering and thinking about designing these spaces with photography and virtual digital photography in mind, then I can create really beautiful and compelling compositions and experiences, not just in 3D, but also on social media or marketing campaigns or email addresses or anything like that, to help conversions, to help get people into your company, to help get people into your spaces, right? And you know, if I was really thinking about this, then and really prioritizing this, then I would probably put the logo there, right? That would be a good spot for the logo, right?
Yeah.
But
Hey, Connor.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to mention that too. You know, I'm working on a scene right now for my college, and I branded it with our college logo,
Perfect.
and you know, also with, you know, making it 3D and everything. And I think that that's going to go a long way with adoption, with my, you know, internally with my organization. You know, trying to get faculty, for example, to adopt hubs and offering them a space that's not only appropriate but branded too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's basically why that exact reason is why you see my, oops, I took another picture. Why you see this ridiculous, you know, when you load into the room, you load in from right here. The first thing you see is like this ridiculous logo that is gigantic and on the wall, and it has this really shiny reflection on there, which, by the way, if you I'm working on this, is still work in progress, but if you enter in through the green, you'll actually go through it and you'll appear on the other side. So I'm gonna make a like a matrix hallway right here, you know, like the end of the one, so you can actually enter the matrix. You can go through the logo and you'll see the other side. But that's still WIP. All the other walls work, you know, they're all solid walls.
Hey, Connor, question about your since you didn't bake with the world HDR, you kind of can get away with not worrying about the light source for the environment out there. You can cheat it a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that is on a background shader. Oh, I threw the picture. Let me just put that right there. That is contributing some light. Like, it is contributing some color. It's not much. It's very, very little. Mostly it's this gigantic area light that's right there that I have slightly tinted just a little bit of color to it to give a little bit of warmth to the floor and the walls. But yeah, that HDRI is doing some stuff, and maybe 90+% of the time you do want to have an HDRI filling in light. I just happen to have enough color and light in this scene, and there's only one exterior light source that I can basically treat this as an interior lighting, and just use just the basic lights, and I don't really need the world one. But this one is contributing light. If I turn off everything, every other light in the scene, you will still see a little bit of green, blues, and pinks coming in from that dome.
Okay, and then if you were to adjust the exposure on your world environment texture, that would really kind of clamp down on those the color it's lending to the scene and the light versus the intensity map on the Mozilla map. That's more the output exposure.
That is correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So the on the Mozilla map, that intensity is basically it's basically just doing this. It's just sliding this up or down. Right? So you can set that to wherever you want for it to feel aesthetically appealing to you. I would say stay consistent, so they are all the same value, whether you use pi or 1 or whatever. And it's probably not a great idea to do a whole bunch of editing on that Moz light map. Like if you, for example, are rendering all this stuff out, and you're like, oh, you know what? I need to increase my brightness, so I'm just going to set this to 10. And then you have to set them all to 10. Well, maybe instead what you should do is you should just make these lights brighter. So that way the bake is brighter instead of adjusting it in that node. You should probably keep this node pretty simple, either pi or 1. But if you want to, you can. Like I was earlier, adjusting these settings like crazy. So this was the latest office that I did. The first office that I did looked like this. Let me just close these ones out. This is the first office I did, and you can see there's been a huge upgrade in quality to the second one, right? Was experimenting with light baking, was experimenting with tiled textures and stuff. It's similar design, but just there's been a series of improvements around graphics improvements on Mozilla Hubs, and also artistic improvements on my end, creative improvements, and just little things like this where it's like I didn't model this precisely, and because I didn't model it precisely, the outside is brighter than the inside, and the outside is actually bleeding into the inside because the texture resolution doesn't have enough pixels to separate the difference between outside and inside, right? And so now on the new version, if you look at my Blender here, you can see that everything has been modeled like very, very precisely. Everything has been snapped, and there's no bleeding of any type. Like all these models are all like, none of them are crashing through or anything like that. And then that gives a much higher fidelity quality result. But I didn't really know that would be a problem. This was a year ago. I made this scene a year ago. I still like the lighting, it's still cool, but yeah, it's way nicer now.
Hey Connor, was this are all the light baking baked into your base color for this one?
This was not. They are separate maps, but they're all in unlit materials. There's no reflections in here. The only reflections are on the on these metal bars, and you can see they don't even reflect the scene. They just reflect a generic sky dome, which is actually on the other side of this dome. This dome isn't as accurately placed as either, but that sky dome is on the other side here. That's what it's reflecting, because it at this time there was no custom environment maps for reflections. So you see these reflections are reflecting that sky there.
That's great. I don't think I saw this comparison. I've only seen your new scene. So this is
cool.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let's see who we still have left in here. Most people are still here. That's awesome. What are there any other questions about kind of either from top level 30,000 foot view or all the way to nuts and bolts, plugins, techniques, optimizations, processes, or anything like that I can answer?
I'm going to keep chiming. Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I suppose the question is, will there be a way in which you can create an avatar that would function in every environment, like across the board? But would there also be a way that you can customize them? So Discord, for example, I have a game persona and I have a professional persona. So, I have these two things I have to slide between. And Discord gives me the opportunity to customize them as server per server. Is that something that you think would happen, or does it
Totally.
happen now?
It does. Yeah.
Oh,
So you can do that, like if you're all on Mozilla Hubs clients, then you can do that by either swapping email or just swapping your avatar and name. What's quite cool is that your display name can be anything at all, and your display name is actually generated. I can hear myself if you don't mind muting.
I apologize.
No, you're all good. Your display name is it's whatever you want it to be. It's not linked to anything, so you can change it at any time, and you can change your avatar at any time. And most of this happens on room load. So when you enter a new room, you can have a new name and face for that new room at any time. And this is part of what Mozilla Hubs is like. It's part of their overarching philosophy of anonymity and privacy. You can be identity is totally up to you, whatever you want, and that's on a per hubs room. But even across multiple different hubs clouds, like if you go to MetaHood or you go to Utopia VR, it's going to prompt you to log in with a new username and avatar for whichever one you're visiting. Of course, I have a GLB file for my avatar that it's just a URL, and I just bring that with me wherever I go. And anytime you want to go into your own custom, you just have this avatar GLB URL. You drop it in right here, and that way I have my face across any of the Metaverse clients that I enter into.
Interesting. Yeah, just again, looking at it as a game designer, my interest is, you're obviously showing environment modeling, but I think that probably a big opportunity would be custom avatars, designing things that give people the enormous opportunity to express themselves however they want.
Yep.
So, yeah,
infinite opportunity there.
Yeah, I won't bother with you about asking about your avatar today, but
I'm lazy. I cheated. So anybody that wants an avatar like mine can just go to readyplayer.me, and it is a avatar generator for multiverses. And I've actually made a new one recently, so I need to update it. But now the new one's wearing like a beanie. So this is my new one. But I actually want to swap out the brand, the Ready Player Me, with my own logo because I'm sneaky like that. And can do it, right? So here's my new avatar that I'll probably be using more often. But you can you can change these, you can customize these, you can create your own. They're super duper simple. They come with a rig that automatically moves the eyes and moves the mouth when you're speaking. So you have like a tremendous amount of opportunity to customize these. And of course, if you have 3D skills, then you can customize these even further. Just popping it up in Blender or Maya or wherever. Probably want to stick to Blender because Blender has the Hubs exporter, so the mouth thing will still work. But yeah, if I wanted to change any of this stuff, then I totally could. I could put on sweet sunglasses. And readyplayer.me is really, really awesome. The great company that is just continued to supply all of these for free. I've never paid for any of this stuff, but it's pretty sweet.
I suppose the next question is, so they don't mind you like custom designing from their avatars as like a template?
I guess not. I don't imagine they would. They're handing out the GLBs, so I think they know
Actually,
that they're gonna be customized.
Read their terms. They're very favorable towards artists. You actually can claim Creative Commons licensing for your customizations on your avatars.
That's good to know.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Thanks, Sage, for dropping that in there. I'm not surprised. They seem like a really cool company. And this is one of those things where it's like there's this side of the philosophy: open source, Creative Commons. You can have your own Hubs cloud, you can have your own all this stuff, and it's just this beautiful world. And then there's the antithesis of that philosophy, which is Meta, which is Facebook's Meta. It's like, yeah, everything will exist on this platform. It will all belong to us, and we will be able to track and record every square millimeter of it. And it's like, okay, well, I know that that's profitable. I know that they have a dozen billion-dollar lead on any other company that's entering into this space. And I know that they have a marketing lead because that hour-long Zucks video probably has more than 1 million views. But
And they
that's
just
not where I
dumped
want to... Go ahead, Sage.
Just dumped 100. Well, they just announced they're investing 150 billion in education.
There you go.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, and to combat that, because that's good. The education is good, but to combat that, to fight on this side of the philosophy, which is open source and Creative Commons, owned by the users, owned by the individuals, not owned by a single corporation, is part of what we're doing here today. Is I am doing these streams on a weekly basis so we can train up, all of these artists and individuals to enter into this industry to make it a more fair and balanced place for everyone instead of one corporation having the majority impact. So that's kind of what this stream is about, and that's what these streams will be about. And I'm here to take any questions, answer anything, and I'm very likely to be using this time to just build these spaces. And you can ask any questions, or you can build alongside me, and we'll get to work on making alternatives, making cool custom alternatives.
Connor, can I jump in for a sec?
Please.
So we're actually partnered with with the Ready Player Me guys, and we had a call with them yesterday, and so they intend. So they've been working on this for a while. They just got their Series A, so they have a bunch more resources now.
Mm-hmm. That's
Can you still
epic.
hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Oh,
That's weird.
sorry, I
don't know
muted
if you-
myself. Yes, I can still hear you. Keep going.
okay.
That's epic.
Yeah, so but no, just to let you, because I think somebody asked about designing avatars. They're going to open up their platform to third-party designers to be able to create add-ons and avatars and sell them on their network. So just so you guys know.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that,
Sure.
Charles.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love that model. Yeah, that's something that, I think a lot of companies will be wanting to do something similar. If I had the infrastructure, MetaHood would do the same, but I'm basically just going to be teaching, building, and renting. That's going to be my little niche.
Connor, this has been a really valuable experience. So I'm happy you're doing these streams, and I appreciate you staying longer today too. Maybe I should save my questions for the next one.
You can always hit me up in the Owl3D chat. I may end up making a channel for just like Metaverse topics, and I'm going to do a little bit of house cleaning around the Discord, get people assigned roles and stuff. So Metaverse people are getting the Metaverse events, and animation people are getting the animation events, and all that stuff. I haven't organized that stuff yet, so I'm gonna be working on that. But anytime you have any question for me, you can basically put it into any channel, and I will find it. Anthony, did you have a question? I saw you unmute.
Yeah, there was two topics. I just saw this video yesterday. These folks who scanned a ghost town and then put the models into Mozilla Hubs rooms so you can walk around this ghost town. It was absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so cool. Okay, hold on. And then the other question was, I've been pretty obsessed with Nomad Sculpt these days because getting on a computer has been kind of difficult these days. So just being able to pick up an iPad and kind of doodle around has been fun. And then the ability to paint with Procreate has just been incredible. So I'd be interested at some point to see kind of that workflow process, or how you could go from iPad and a really ugly UV unwrap in Nomad Sculpt and optimize it for fairly easily optimize it for a Hubs environment.
Yeah, it's so, just to speak at a broad level, like I don't know what that workflow exactly would look like because I haven't used those software, but yeah, Apple is getting very serious about making these tools like very, very accessible and available. So I like I said, I wouldn't know the specifics of it, but I can absolutely see a workflow that is very usable, very productive using those tools for sure. I see. We had a couple of other people join in that I didn't say hello to. Motrog and Federica. How you guys doing?
Hey Connor,
How are you doing?
good. I just jumped in like too late, so I didn't follow the beginning of the meeting, but it looks very interesting.
Cool, cool. It was streamed and recorded, so we can catch you up later if you like.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that satisfy everyone for now? And Sage, I'll stay for the next 7 minutes, so we'll close this out at 11, and I'll hit your question if you still have it. But just before we do, I want to make sure, Yuri, how are you feeling about it? Like, you feel like this is something you can tackle? Yuri, yeah, go ahead.
That will take me a while because yeah, I got Blender installed,
Cool.
but I don't have access to Substance. I'll just have to figure out how I'll create.
I didn't even use Substance for the office. Used all Blender.
Okay, well, I'll just have to learn a bit more Blender.
Yeah, and you know what? Wednesday night Owl Clubs and Thursday morning Metaverse streams. Like, just be around, and we'll get you the training you need.
Yuri, I've seen your work firsthand. I'll say this on behalf of you. You are very capable and fully capable of getting into this. I think this is actually
No doubt.
I think this is challenge-wise a step down for you, but creative-wise a step up.
Well, I'll figure something out.
I'd agree with that assessment. Federica, I saw you unmute. Did you have a question?
Not really.
Okay.
Like, is everything so new that I don't know what to ask, honestly?
Yep.
So just following, yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, especially for those spaces that you've been making, those renders and stuff. Like, if you're able to basically add a couple of departments onto your production pipeline, so you don't end up with a still, but you actually end up with a space, then I don't think you'll be following. Like, right now you have all those amazing Instagram accounts that you're using as reference, and you're kind of following in their footsteps. But if you actually take this to the next level and create spaces for each one of those environments that you generate, then you will be leading the
Yeah,
pack.
it would be great, yeah.
So yeah, we can train you up to do that kind of stuff too.
I've also seen your work, Federica. I'm very sure that you're in the same boat as Yuri.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Seriously, we got a good crew in here. What about you, Mir? Was I able to answer any of the questions that you had?
Yeah, and more. Yeah, I've learned a lot, and lots of opportunities. I was just wondering, in terms of animation, how much potential is there? Like, how much animation will the servers be able to handle right now?
I think environmental animation is huge.
Mhm.
Moving clouds and cars going by on freeways or whatever it is, whatever. Like, I saw one that was absolutely epic. It was a few other people in here saw it too. It was a freeway art gallery where it was just this long highway and their art was on the side. So all you had to do was just walk down the highway, and there was really nice music, and it was during sunset, and it was just a vibe. It was so nice. And then if you looked up across the sky, occasionally a like blue whale made out of stars, like a constellation, would just like be floating by, just swimming through the stars, and it was made out of stars, and it floated by, and everyone was like, oh my god, did you see the whale? Right? So that was like that's something that is just, animation brings these spaces to life. Lighting sets the mood, modeling gives you the architecture, and animation absolutely will bring the life. So there's going to be a huge opportunity for environmental animation and character animation. and avatar animation as well. Like you can have an avatar that's like floating up and down. Like I had a ghost avatar that had like sheets and it was breathing, right? You know, and it's just like just all that type of stuff is definitely going to be things that animators, well, that people will need and hire animators to create.
Well, that sounds very interesting and promising.
I would agree. How anybody else that I can or actually let's take Sage's question and then we'll call it a night or a day. It's 11 a.m.
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate that. And great questions and comments from everybody too. So I have in the Discord for Hubs, I have a thread right now about workflow, whether you should be using Spoke or just bypassing Spoke altogether and just using the import from Blender option in Spoke. And I've been working on a scene where I'm learning how to light bake, and I'm feeling really proud of myself. I've got a beautiful light bake on a room that I'm ready to use with students.
Yes.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So, but there's some concerns, right? Like, I was using the new environment settings for the HDR lighting, and it really pushed up the file size. And also, it didn't work on iOS, which was a really big concern too. So I decided to back away from that, and I was still able to achieve a really beautiful light bake and not use the new environment settings. So, but I think pretty much what you showed us today, the light map features in Hubs and just using the lighting from Spoke, and that seems to really do the trick. I got the file down to I think like 3 megabytes.
Wow.
So, it's just a simple 4-wall scene where students will present their work in.
Perfect.
But it has that really nice lighting. And then I also used a 360 image of our campus to give that authenticity of they're in that space. They're at our campus. And so my question is, I think that Spoke and that workflow lends towards building assets. This is an entire model that you just might port into Spoke, and so there's a lot of thought around workflow.
Yep.
Or I should be breaking things out modularly and building the scene in Spoke, or just doing it all in Blender. And
I think there's strengths and weaknesses to both for sure. If you have the environment map, you need to do this. You need to bypass Spoke for now. Hopefully that won't always be the case. I like using Spoke. Spoke's fun. Spoke's nice. But I do also appreciate the, going straight from Blender straight into Hubs. That's efficient as hell as well. So right now, for anything that uses an environment map, you got to skip it. But if you don't need an environment map, then building it in Spoke is totally viable. It's absolutely up to your discretion and what you'd rather do. You can either have like all the lights and all the waypoints and all the spawners and all that stuff built into Blender and a little toolkit that you've already pre-built them and you drag and drop them around, or you can do that in Spoke. It's already pre-built for you. So I like Spoke. I think Spoke's great. But yeah, because I like environment maps more, then I end up bypassing it.
Thanks, Connor. The toolkit sounds interesting. I think I got more to learn. So
that's something that I'm going to be developing as well. That's something and maybe that will be a free tool that I'm able to hand out. It's an add-on for like a Spoke thing inside of Blender, because that's basically what we need, so we don't have to add in a Hubs component all the time to every single empty.
Well, hey, maybe down the road too. I know there's exciting new things with transmission with GLTF.
Yes, there is. There is really cool stuff with transmission. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but it's processor heavy. It's really hardware intense.
Oh, okay. That's good to know
but
too.
It's beautiful. So that's what you get.
I do have a super quick question.
Sure.
Sorry, I was just trying to eat and I realized it was almost over. The application of cloud-based meta, wouldn't that greatly reduce the limitations and demands that we currently see on like the websites as we see them? Like if we had like one central massive processor like handling everybody who joins,
Yeah, it's being computed right now across every access hardware. So yeah, I mean that is kind of like a dream scenario. I think that's one of the things. I mean, I'm speaking completely outside of my wheelhouse right now, but
I figured, yeah.
yeah, but I think that's like what the Google quantum computers are like supposed to be able to do stuff like that. But right now, it's far more efficient for me as a server, if I'm a server, to serve you a file and have you load it, process it, render it, and do all that stuff on your computer, serve someone else a file and have them process and render and do all that stuff on their computer, and then for me to try to process both at once and deliver. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, I hear stuff like that is happening, centralized render farms and Unreal Engine and stuff like that is just distribution. It's just serving. It's not actually rendering locally, but we are far from that utopia, I think.
Interesting. All right. I just figured it would probably hit meta long before it moved into either mobile games or conventional games. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just curious to see where it goes, and I didn't know anything about it, so I thought I would ask. Thank you.
No worries. No worries. Okay, guys, that's it for me. My only request of you guys is that if you learned something today and if you liked the stream, like give me any feedback that you can on things that you want to learn about, things that you want to do deeper dives on, or things that you're curious about. Just drop it into that Owl3D chat. Let's talk about it. Let's keep this dialogue going. And if this was useful for you, then next week at Thursday, invite someone, bring someone in so that we can teach as many people as possible. And I wanted to I think Charles left, but yeah, Charles had to jet. But Charles' company Utopia VR is the reason why we're able to do this, because his company is sponsoring these streams, and it helps me prioritize the time to be able to have these discussions with you, because it's something that I'm actually getting paid to do. So I'm very, very grateful to Utopia VR. And if you want to check out virtual spaces and stuff like that, just check them out. Give them a look.
I would ask one more thing, Connor. If
yes, please.
It's okay for the folks that are attending, we may reach out with an anonymous survey just so you can give us a little feedback so we can continue to improve what we're doing. Would be greatly appreciated. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. And if it's not, that's fine. You don't have to answer, and that's okay too.
Totally. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks for adding that in there. Yeah, it is super important. I want to be in dialogue with you guys. I want to know, the parts that you thought were awesome and the parts that you thought were boring, because I know they're there. I know it, so want to try to improve this as absolutely much as we can so we can train up and get as many people into this new opportunity as possible, because it's a whole huge world to take advantage of, and there's just tremendous amounts of opportunities in it. All right, thanks, guys. I'm shutting it down. We'll see you guys in the Discord, and I'm here Wednesday nights and Thursday mornings now for live streams. So see you guys around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys, everybody.